forget. Now I'll turn it over to Andy. Take it away.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I did laugh because it's a dumb name. And if people think this is funny, you're really going to enjoy the rest of this talk. So to start, let me figure out how to click on things. I'm Andy Smith, as mentioned. I'm an AVP of product at League. League is a med tech, health tech company that's really like focused on helping people live happier lives, live longer, really manage their health and their benefits and other things. Great spot. Definitely check that out. Bit more about me. I've built and released just a ton of apps. I started my career just before kind of the iPhone came out. The iPhone came out, and I was early on that train. Released over 50 apps. We've been downloaded about 500 million times across all of those. A little bit of my bona fides on why you might care what I have to say about product and all the things that I'm going to chat about. The other big thing that I'm going to talk about is changing industries. And if anyone was curious, yes, I am going to go through the entire alphabet, and yes, the entire thing is going to be like this, and it makes me very happy. But the big thing that I want to talk about here is by changing industries, I actually got my start in video games. I started making Facebook games, social games, games that were on like early Blackberries and J2ME. The iPhone came out. I moved into making iPhone games. Did that for 13 or 14 years. Was very fun. It was very exciting. I was a producer in games, which is basically a product manager, just with a weird title, just something I'll address a little bit later on the difficulties of changing your titles. But I did that for a long time until I got to the point where I was getting a little bit tired of trying to figure out how the industry went and how we eventually were just trying to convince kids to watch video ads. And I really wanted to apply kind of like what I was good at, what my niche was, into something that could be a little bit more like helpful to people. So I moved into fitness tech for a few years, making fitness apps with fitness influencers, making fitness apps for people to work at home, to work at little gyms. Super fun. And then I've moved that into, again, an area where I can really help more people by getting into medical tech to help people really manage their health through healthcare and things like that. And I'm also delighted to be here. This is it's a really cool opportunity. I love any kind of get together with this type of industry, seeing all the people that come through and all of the really amazing things that come from this. Again, speaking from the video game industry that I came from, video game people love to hang out with video game people, talk about video games, really get into that. Obviously, product management has such a wide variety of things that there's not quite that same niche. But it is really exciting to see all of the people in Toronto getting together and really coming together to make a fun little community. Okay, so first I'm going to jump right in, and I'm going to say that everything happens. I crossed out for a reason because things are just going to happen. And so this is where we really get into the core of what we're talking about here on the always be changing. Change is just going to happen around you. There's going to be new opportunities, new roles, new focuses. COVID exists, that added some changes. When the iPhone came out, that created some changes. It's always going to happen, and it's always going to keep happening. And so that's something to just keep in mind as we go through this, that everything happens and will keep happening. Now, sometimes those things that happen are very fortunate, and sometimes they're not. And so as we get into talking about what change is, I just want to lay out that what I'm going to talk about and what we'll talk about here is that some of the change that's going to happen is going to be driven by you, your choices, your wants, your dreams, your desires. Some of those changes are just going to happen to you. And they are different, they feel different, they hit different, but the way you can manage those things is fundamentally the same. And so whether this change is going to be something that's very fortunate, that's very exciting, or it's going to be something that is going to be less fortunate and it's more of a climb back, it makes a big difference in how you feel, but how we manage it is going to be applicable either way. So I'm going to stand up. I'm sitting. Okay, next. We are going to get low, get low. Um, as we talk about this change that comes through and kind of like understanding of your career, one thing that I've found a lot of success on, I think a lot of people can, as you navigate these pieces, is to really get a like low level understanding and like thought process on like what your experience is, how your experience is. So what I mean by this is um, I made video games. That's great. But fundamentally, what I was bringing to that, my experience in it was economic design focused on engagement. And so if we really look at kind of like what my experience is, my experience has been in engagement, whether it was in trying to get people to play another game, trying to get people to spend coins on power-ups, trying to get people to go to the gym, trying to get people to take their meds or measure their blood sugar or like visit their doctor. All of these things are fundamentally the same. So my real value and my real contribution there is in engagement. And then if we need a niche to go along with that, mine would be in incentivization and kind of like economic design. So if you have point systems, how do you incentivize people properly? How do you set up the right rewards and mechanics in order to kind of like get people to do something that's beneficial to them and to you as a product owner, but that they wouldn't necessarily naturally do on their own. You know, everyone knows to eat vegetables and exercise and do all those healthy things, but having a competition with your friends to do it just makes it like that much more incentivizing. And so as you're going through these pieces, knowing what your like low level experience and value is absolutely key. Which leads directly into the next piece, which is picking up a focus. There's going to be a lot of talk in here of like malleability, of being able to kind of like shift your focuses, work with a variety of experiences. And one of the things that I do want to kind of like lay in is there is a specific separation between having a hyper focus and just having a focus. So again, when we talk about a niche, I'm referring to, you know, product management, good at all the things that PMs are good at. Everyone is. We're all good at it. There's not that many things to do. It's a pretty straightforward job. But when it comes to like what your secret sauce is, like what the spice that you're going to bring to it, that's the niche. And so, as I mentioned before, my niche is in engagement with a focus on incentivization. If there was a scenario where we wanted to do an engagement piece where there wasn't some sort of a incentivization attached to it, that's okay. This is where we get into the don't hyper focus and stick to like, that's the only thing I can do is reach engagement through some sort of incentivization. Being able to be malleable and understanding that like low level piece I was talking about before is going to be, so critical to showing your value and really like building your career and building your future focus. So this comes through to the next one, which is knowing what your impact is. And so now that you've kind of like, you understand the low level value, what you've got, you understand your niches. Next, I really want everybody to understand what your impact is. And like your impact, for my example, again, of being focused on engagement is, what is engagement? Why is it good? Having people return to a product over and over again, of course, that's good. That is a valuable piece that like everyone is really easily understood. When you get into the more specific niches of using an incentivization to do that type of thing, it gets into the impact there being, can we get a positive ROI on what the value of that incentivization is versus the value that having somebody come back in and do those actions that we're looking for them to do. And again, I'm using my examples here, but this really flows across all manner of things. I've got somebody that's on one of my teams. She's phenomenal. She's really focused on kind of communicating complicated situations and complicated functionality to members in a really simple way. And so her niche really is creating experiences that can be easily understood, no matter the complexity of them. And the impact that drives is her retention and completion KPIs on the stuff that she touches are out of this world. And so being able to explain to somebody, external, internal, new career, old career, whatever, about why what you do has that value, how it brings that impact, and kind of carry them along to being like, well, why is this good? Why should they care? This is all part of kind of crafting that story of really understanding what like you can bring to any situation. So as we kind of continue on this thread, you're going to notice that we're really talking a lot about people in this industry understanding what they're bringing, what they can offer, why what they're doing is good. There's a bit of this where I think it sounds like, we're really talking about like, oh, getting a new job, going through job interviews, making that stuff happen. The answer is yes, this is very valuable for that, but it's also very valuable for solving the like specific product problems that you're going to run into. By understanding really fundamentally like what you're trying to do, again, my example being increase engagement, you can push harder on what are the levers I can use to pull that? And so going into the niches that you have, and then going into like, well, what's the impact we expect? And so it's applicable beyond just managing your career, but also into like managing the products that you're going to do and applying those things to a bunch of different scenarios. So with our just the hits piece here, you really want to like think about and talk about not just the successes on like how you're learning and how you're growing, but also on the duds that you've hit. So this really like folds into as things change around you and as you grow in your career, new jobs, new positions, new products, new features, things like that. Knowing the impact, knowing the value you're bringing, and then also knowing what you shouldn't do is super, super important. And so thinking about and talking about like, well, what happened when something went wrong? There's a ton to be learned in not just kind of anchoring to those successes, but also anchoring pretty hard into knowing what didn't quite work out. Cool. So next I want to really talk about things that rhyme. And so this one's really focused on, again, taking on new pieces of work, new roles, new careers, new focuses. There's always going to be things that rhyme in the new thing that you're doing with the old stuff that you were doing. What I mean by this is as change happens, there's turmoil. It's really hard to kind of like grasp onto something solid, but there's always going to be something that you're going to run into with any opportunity, any project that is kind of out of the box, something that you just know how to do because you've done something like it before. It's impossible to do big changes and do big swings and find the exact same pieces that you can impact the exact same way every single time you're going to do that. But there's always going to be things that you can say, oh, well, like, last time we had really great reviews in our app. And one of the ways we did that is we put up a request for review after a moment of success as that member was going through it. So what we would do is when you got a new high score, there was a good stopping point. We would say, hey, if you're having fun with the game, could you give us a rating? And now, of course, if I wanted to increase the ratings in a health app, you don't have that opportunity where someone just got a high score. It's not something that exists. But what you want to be able to do is look for what rhymes and go, okay, well, what is the moment through a workout where I feel the best? It's probably not as I'm getting ready. That part sucks. Like the anticipation of getting there, that sucks. It's probably not when I'm like checking it out for the first time because I'm trying to read. It's not a good opportunity to leave to go rate a review. But what about when I've finished a particularly good workout? And looking at the metrics of it's not my first workout because I haven't really used the app enough, but really trying to find those opportunities to recognize in the past things that have rhymed to find you bits of success or things that didn't work and applying them to the future by, again, getting low, really understanding the core of where that value is, and then applying that to the future. Okay, next, kind of building on top of that, we want to look, listen, learn, live, laugh, love. This one is one of my favorites, not just because this is a dumb slide that makes me laugh, but also because I have found just a ton of success over the years looking at how smarter people than me learn, looking at more successful products than me are evolving. And so one example I love to use, which is decades old now, so no one will understand the games that I'm talking about. But in the early Facebook days, there's a game called Farmville, there's a game called Cityville, there's a game called Frontierville. They were all by Zynga, great studio in Toronto now, at the time San Francisco. And these games were, all three of them were like fundamentally the same idea. You would have a space, you would be given tasks to do that were time-based. You would come back at some regular cadence to, water your crops and then harvest them. And then you could build a little barn and you could store your crops for longer so they wouldn't, churn and all that kind of jazz. But because they had these three games that were fundamentally the same mechanics, what I realized is Zynga, which was a multi-million dollar company at the time, billions now, I'm sure. But at the time, multi-million, I realized that they were doing experiments in each of the games. They would tweak something, try something, introduce a new mechanic. If that mechanic was successful, you would then see it in the other games. If that mechanic wasn't successful, it might just stay in that game because it's hard to pull a mechanic out. It might get pulled out. And so I realized by kind of tracking over time what was changing with each of those, I could kind of decompose or decrypt the learnings that Zynga was doing as they were trying those pieces out. So seeing the things that they would expand, I could infer that, hey, that must have been something good. And by trying to then figure out, well, what about it was good, and kind of doing a post-mortem on someone more successful's features and introductions, I was able to take those learnings and directly apply them to what we were doing. Again, looking for that stuff that rhymes. And this is something I've done all through my career, taking like XP systems for leveling up and applying those directly to a ranking system we had in a fitness app, right? I looked at what's it called, Fortnite's experience point system and how they did their tiers, took those literal numbers and I applied them to a competition for a challenge workout in a fitness app. My thinking being Epic being a multi-billion dollar company, they've probably done some testing on what's the right cadence for new rewards to come through. So why don't I just steal that? I don't have $1 billion to figure it out. I'll steal that, try it out, see how it goes for us. So big piece here is not only can you look at your own experiences, look for those things that rhyme and apply that going forward, but you can also just do that with other people. You can kind of retroactively learn from other folks to really build your own war chest of really great ideas and great pieces of functionality. Cool. Motivations, Mo solved problems. So this is where we're going to take a bit of a shift. So the first bit of this, all the way up to the all the way up to the L, was kind of really focused on, know that change is going to happen. Really anchor into like what's your value, what's your understanding, so that you can like manage through that change a bit more. Some quick tips for how you apply some of those learnings in ways to center yourself to be really valuable into the next piece. And then what we're getting into here is a bit more of a, let's say you've got that, your value, your niche, you're great at what you do. How do you then work with others in this space? Everyone knows PMing, very social job. You can't do anything by yourself. You could, but like no one wants to log into Jira and read a bunch of user stories and be like, oh, wow, I can imagine that would be a really great product. It's got to be built. You got to work with people. And so one of the big things that I always try to do in these situations, particularly in new situations, is do what I can to understand the motivations of all of the kind of stakeholders that are there. I think, the by the book numbers, you've got your stakeholders, you've got your major contributors, like all that kind of jazz. That's great. But really understanding like what do they need out of this will get you a very long way. Sometimes you'll have stakeholders, they just need something to exist. They're behind the 8 ball, they haven't shipped enough things, they just need something to come out quickly. Knowing that can help you craft what your offering is going to be and your contributions are going to be. If you understand what they need, what all the people that are involved in need, you have a better opportunity to bring a lot of value to them and learn and understand how to work with all of these different competing factors. You'll always have some people who, you know, you have a designer who wants it to be like perfect and amazing, an engineer who wants it to be like rock solid, could stand up to 100 million people all pinging at the same time. You've got a senior like me who wants it to be done and live and stop spending money on this. And truly understanding where everyone's coming with and kind of the color that puts on your interactions with them and the feedback that they're going to do is really going to help you find a ton of success in any new situation or an old situation, but really any new situation. Is it's one of the first things I like to do is in these situations is figure out like what's in it for all of these people. So to get a little bit meta, me doing this talk, obviously this wonderful organization needs people to do talks. I know that motivation. They got to put a butt in the seat. They don't want to embarrass themselves by having someone talk at you who is irrelevant or dumb or is gonna, you know, not actually be helpful. Totally makes sense. So hopefully I meet that. And my motivation of this is I like hearing myself talk. I like my dumb presentations, and I really just like this community and I like this career path. So I want to see if I can do to help everybody. When you meet those things in the middle, you can find wins, which is a really, really big transition into my no wins equals no winning scenario. This is a dumb phrase, but I say it constantly. But it's where's the win? And what I mean by this is once you understand those motivations of what everyone is, really considering like what does success look like for all of these people? And again, this is another one of those ones that you can apply this direct thinking to the soft skills of working with the people around you. You can apply this directly to what you're trying to do for your end user and like how do they do it, but identifying like, well, what is success? Vaguely, it's like a definition of done, but a definition of everyone is super stoked at the outcome of this. And so with this type of thing, again, with my previous scenario of like trying to understand everyone's motivations, is how do we find as many wins as possible for all of the people involved? When you can get that where it's not necessarily a compromise, there's a bit of a tangent, which is going to be funny with all these dumb colors I've got. There's something that I talk about a lot with my teams internally, and I call it just the graying of products. And what it is when you have something that could be really great, but there's a problem with it. And so you're like, okay, well, this part's a bit too bright. And so you knock off that part. And then a different person who's motivated is saying, ooh, well, we're not sure if everyone's going to love this piece. So let's like knock off a bit of that color. And then someone else says, ooh, well, to make it the safest, to be the most stable, let's knock off this little bit. And then what you end up with is just gray sludge. It's nothing. It's been completely sanded down to being kind of the most palatable, the most consumable, the least valuable thing it can be. And it's a scenario where in that world, no one is winning. No one is happy that all of these concessions had to be made. Everyone is just kind of whatever on the outcome. And it's a lot of it is because we lose sight of, well, what would be exciting for each of these people? Like what is the motivation? Where's the win for everybody, including our end member? And we really can't forget them. And so this is then directly related to being the odd one out, which is that you can't win them all. Sometimes, a lot of times, when you have enough people, you can't have everyone win every scenario. So many times, and I'm sure everyone here has been through this case, you know, it'll be, okay, we're going to take a risk on the stability of this product. We don't think that many people will hit it to save time on development, get it out sooner, that type of thing. That's a scenario where your developer who's really focused on like stability is not going to win. You might have a world where, in the product's sense, someone's just going to say, hey, we're just going to change this. It doesn't really, like, it technically meets the needs for our members, but we're just going to change the title of it and we're going to call it good. And it's like, is that a great experience? Is that really like what's best? Is it really going to help our KPIs? No, but it meets a lot of other wins. And so when I talk about being the odd one out, something that I really try to take on myself is looking at, well, which of all the people who would like a win can I just not have one? And where this comes through is strong beliefs, loosely held. I have lots of opinions, lots of feelings on things, but occasionally it's much easier to look at that and go, okay, well, if we change this and this, I don't necessarily get my win, but it's still valuable, and all of you people get your win, and it's a good product at the end of the day. And where this has a ton of value when you're going through a lot of these processes is a lot of times everyone else is going to remember that you helped them get their win. You helped them work through their problem, help them work through what they were really concerned about to get to that. That's going to be way more important to them than them remembering, did you get your win out of it? Was it perfect? And so this is a bit of a counter to my previous, like, find the wins. That's about knowing them. This is just coming to the realization that, like, sometimes it's not going to be there, but finding as much wins for everybody without necessarily holding them all for yourself makes a really cohesive experience, and really, like, across the board helps build those relationships, build those learnings, and kind of grow from there. So then we get to kind of bringing together, I was mentioning, talking about, like, knowing your value, knowing how to apply it, knowing what you can offer from the past into the future. Same thing when it comes to the product of knowing the values that you found before, the wins you found before, how do you, like, bring those forward into the future? So when I talk about PMing the PM, I really want to focus on, like, all of us being PMs, we are good at that. And so you should PM yourself. You should PM your career. And what I'm referring to here is, if I'm in a scenario where, I'm trying to be promoted, I'm trying to get a raise, trying to figure out, like, how to really, like, advance my career at a singular place, one of the things that I need to know is I need to know what is the way that my manager, who's the person who's kind of, like, helping me do this, or the people above me, what would be a win for them as well? Like, how would my success bring them success? What can I do to make their life easier so that they think of me as somebody who makes lives easier and has a lot of value, and things like that? And this works with peers as well. One thing that Leak does that I absolutely love, a lot of companies will do this. So if you're at a tech company, you probably do it, but we'll do kind of like a kudos system where you can, like, send kudos to your peers to say, oh, Zoe helped me so much with this thing. She's a rock star. I really appreciate it. Or, like, oh, whenever I need help with this, Rogan is always there. Take advantage of those systems. Go give reviews to other people. They will give reviews to you. Don't be shameless. Be shameless is what I'm actually going to say. Is be shameless about stuff like that. It's all there to kind of, like, bring that focus in, because the way that it works is your success directly impacts the view of the success of your manager and their manager and their manager. You want to share that success up and down. And so, again, like, understanding, like, what are my KPIs for success, not for just you personally, but for the people around you who are going to be able to help you. So find out, like, what you could do for your manager that would help them get you promoted. And so one example I often have with, my the PMs that report to me is we'll sit and we'll craft together some of the pieces for, like, a self-review so we can hit some of the same notes. And it's really like, hey, I think you're really good at this. I think you should mention that you were really successful here. I will also mention that. That helps me say, look, this person did something great. They're giving you more information on it. And it helps with that whole process where we're a team. We work together on trying to craft the product, the feature that is, career advancement. And so take the time, look at your career and the things around you, and treat it like a product that you're trying to make better, learn from, contribute real value to. And this one's a fun one because it's true. Quitting is really good, and I don't just mean, like, quitting your job. I mean quitting, focus on something, quitting a concern on something that you're doing, knowing when to stop doing something is so, so important. You don't ever want to be so rigid that you can't kind of like move away from something that's not working, or stop doing something that is just like a lot of effort that's not going to get you there. And so again, this one really flows into a bit of both the like soft skills piece, the career change, and like into the product stuff. Um, if you are creating a product, you're collecting your analytics, and you know that people just aren't using it, they don't like it, it's not there. You can do a ton of iterations to try to improve it. At some point, you probably just turn the feature off, right? At some point, you just sunset it. If it's really not picking up, why are you continuing to throw good money at bad? It's a very like straightforward way to say like, hey, this is the extent of its success. It's sad, pour one out, sorry, but it's got to go. Knowing when to make those hard choices in product, super important, particularly if you're coming into something new. The number of times I've come through into a new role or into a new product or a new area, and I've looked at what they have, and I go, this doesn't work, right? Like it clearly doesn't work. And they'll always say, yeah, and we've tried 10 million things to change it. Like, what 10 million and one thing, Andy, can you tell us that'll be different that can help us change it? And a lot of times my answer is maybe turn it off because it's clearly not working. If you've tried 10 million times, you're smart. There's not some like magical thing that I'm good at. Maybe it's just bad. Maybe we just got to go back to fundamentals and like, is it that important? And so taking that opportunity to look at what's going on and going, maybe we just shouldn't do this. And if you've hit that point, that's probably the answer. And this does apply to roles as well. If you're at the point where you're like, maybe I should quit my job, you should. Like, you should already be doing that. Very rarely do you get that success and that progress by being in something because of the momentum. Right? It's just you don't want to be codependent to the role and to that career. It's a valuable lesson to learn to know when to fold them, as a song once told me. Cool. Oh, we're getting near the end of the alphabet because the colors are changing, which is real fun. Our next piece here, so repeat to defeat. This is an opportunity really that comes up like more than you would think, is something has gone wrong and you get a second crack at it. We've shipped something, it didn't work, we got to try again. I'm focused on this area, didn't have a lot of success with it before. There's another opportunity to come at it. I do love these chances to get a second crack at things. This runs a little counter to my, know when to quit. That's more extreme. But with this one, it's really like, take any opportunity you can to repeat something and try it a little bit different. Just don't do the same thing twice and expect it to work. The second time, it's not going to. This really kind of like cascades in my, find where things rhyme, look for the patterns that you can apply learnings from the past to the future. Anytime you get an opportunity to kind of like take a second crack at something, and you can also learn from the first crack, try something different, incredibly valuable. Super, super valuable. And this also comes into a scenario where you do have a more direct, like, I had solved this problem in a different way, in a different role before. I'm at a new role. It's kind of the same problem. Should I do the literal exact same thing? Yes and no. Don't do literally the exact same thing. Use what you've learned to do it, but take this as an opportunity to recognize that, again, this is a repeat. What can you do slightly differently than before to get you more success, or get it done quicker or better or whatever, and just kind of like take that opportunity to like try again. And just don't be wrong in the same way more than once, and you'll find just a ton of success. Yeah. And then I want everyone to steal your own advice, and this is literally advice for me that I also never take. Particularly when it comes to like product management, again, being a very social career, very soft skills, very working with a ton of people. In my experience, product managers are very thoughtful people who are generally very empathetic and really kind of like understand what, why, how to communicate with people, and will often offer advice or have good advice to help other folks. But one thing that happens all the time, particularly is, again, big changes come through, new things come on your plate, is you have a bucket of thoughts that you would give to someone else, and then you go, well, I'm not going to take that advice because I thought of it. It's my advice. And what I really want to tell you is that it's probably not your advice. One, you have learned it from all of your experiences. It's actually just your experiences talking to you. That is your advice. But two, if it's good enough for you to give to someone else, give it to yourself. You probably already know what you need to do in those situations. And so following that first, thinking through it objectively, like it were someone else, give yourself a bit of that distance and really like steal that advice for yourself, and you know, get the value of the labor that you're putting in to help other folks for yourself. Cool. Everyone always says progress is not linear. It's not, obviously. Like, progress is all over the place. To speak for myself, I got my first role in video games when I was 18, the university dropout. I did a couple weeks at York. Turns out that's a terrible idea. So I got into a career pretty early. And then when I was, I think, 21 or 22, I was CEO of a successful game studio. Happened super fast. I learned a ton, but it also happened way too fast. And then I was CEO for many years, and then didn't take a step back, but did find it very difficult to go get a role that was not CEO somewhere. A lot of people were seeing that as a step back, a step down. I would, obviously, right now, there's no world I want to be a CEO again. It is a nightmare. It's way better being in product, being in AVP, being on that side of it. Let the CEOs deal with CEO things. But my progress really like peaked for what people were saying, and then looked like it fell off, and it's been climbing again. But that's not how I think of it. If I had moved to a different CEO role for my first one, I would have tanked a more complicated company instantly. We were just very good at making video games. And so because time is linear, it's always going in one direction. Don't measure your progress against that. It's going to be really hard to do, particularly in tech, particularly when we're all remote. It's very difficult to look at what someone else is doing, look at what you're doing, and going, well, why aren't I at their position? Do I really just have to like pay my dues and work for like 10 years to do it? And the answer is no. There are no dues to pay. There's no like earning your space. You know, it's all opportunity and the abilities to like grasp onto that opportunity. A lot of luck, a lot of other factors, of course. But if you're trying to set a plan that is just progress over time, it's not going to work for you, and it's just going to really bum you out. So try not to do it. Just try to consider that like everything happens, the world's going to keep going, and then all you got to do is just what you got to do. This leads into another piece when it comes to kind of like changing. So changing is really hard. And as I mentioned at the beginning, change can happen because of you, change can happen to you, change is going to happen. One of the things that is really difficult to do is to recognize when that change has impacted you negatively, that change is like kind of put an extra burden on you. You know, obviously scenarios where you've been let go, you're trying to find new jobs, that's a big change, or your role has shifted around you and you no longer like it. One of the things that is going to happen a lot is if you don't kind of unpack that baggage and kind of get right with change and be comfortable with where you are, other people will notice. It's not lost on everybody. If you're unhappy, if you're in a bad space with it, if kind of like there's a lot of negativity surrounding it, people are going to notice, and that doesn't help you. And so part of that is, again, going with the flow, unpack that baggage, accept the change, and just know that like change is going to happen and it's good, and how you react to it hopefully using some of the tips I've given is going to help you kind of like grow and develop from there. So one of the examples I'll give from my career is I'm CEO of a game studio. We were then acquired by a medical company, and we founded a new company that I was CEO of, where we were trying to diagnose and treat concussions with video games. Super cool. I loved it. Big passion project for me. I was super, super excited about it. I was CEO of that as well. This was my first time having a new board of directors and a more involved board of directors. And being the young person that I was, I just could not stop fighting with them, to the point where after about a year and a half, almost 2 years, I was removed as CEO. And it was a big change. It was very difficult. This was a company that I helped build. I loved it. The people that were working there, we'd become friends for years and years. And I was fired. I was no longer a CEO. And it took me a really long time to find a new job. It took me about 8-9 months, which felt like a much longer time than it was, but it felt very, very long. And part of that was because I definitely came across in those first few interviews when I was trying to do it, like just salty and mad and kind of bitter about what had happened. And I think it took a long time to, again, really kind of like accept, like, that's done, it's okay, let's move on. And really kind of like unpacking that baggage helped me grow and learn when I started to be able to reflect back on, well, what can I do different? And I'm a very different person because of it, and that's great. So that's all about progress and growth. This one's dumb. Verisimilitude. Verisimilitude is a like literary concept of building truth into a situation. So in if you're going to read like a fantasy novel, like a Lord of the Rings type of thing, knowing that there's like elves and dragons and like orcs and shit, that's verisimilitude, because those things belong there. That makes it seem more real and like more true. And I'm not going to say that I struggled a bit with the letter V and I went with this one, but I'm going to say that I just really like this word. But what I'm trying to get to with this is the situation that you're in is the situation that you're in. Again, good, bad, otherwise. And so kind of acknowledging that and being true to that, and the understanding around you of what that is and where that value belongs is what's going to help you a lot. So the example is, if you are in a new role with a new focus and you're in over your head and you're feeling like overwhelmed, that's okay. Like, it feels hard because it is hard. And being true to that is going to express to everyone who's watching you, everyone you're interacting with, that, well, this person clearly understands what's going on because they are stressed and they are struggling with it a bit, because they should be. There's no value in trying to hide it or lie or be like, hey, this is a super easy thing, when it's not, when other people can clearly see that it's not. So this is really kind of like being true to the situation that you're in, and carrying that through with everything you do, and then that will improve. And it's also it's such a mental and emotional burden to try to like hide when you need help or when you struggle, because that's just not going to help you. So then we're going to get into a wealth of experience. So as I mentioned, I made online social games for a while. Then I made apps. Then I made freemium apps, like games. Then I made premium games. Then I made games with influencers. Then I did a medical product to diagnose and treat concussions. And then I did fitness apps with fitness influencers, fitness apps without fitness influencers. This cool company that just doesn't exist anymore, that we're buying up tiny office spaces and putting micro gyms in them. And then we had an app that you could do your personal training through it in those micro gyms. That was super cool. Then got into League, and this whole variety of things makes a very compelling story now. Early on in my career, there was a lot of concern from me and from other people about like keeping focus, not having too many different things going on, because you don't want to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, that you really need to find where that niche is. And while I do think that's true, I think this is a problem that solves itself as we get into the experience, comma, wealth of continued, which is at a certain point, there is a tipping point where the narrative changes from like a lack of focus to a wealth of experience and knowledge. And you don't get to choose when that happens. It's just going to be part of your story. But as with all of the things that I've mentioned above, like, don't be afraid to change those things. You'll get questions like, again, I have roles on my LinkedIn that I never took down, where I was a director of product at a company for like, I think it was 3 months. And it didn't work out. I didn't get along with the people that worked there. It wasn't a good space for me, so I left. And I left that up there. And going through interviews, I would constantly get questions of like, well, why only 3 months there? And I would tell them. Because it is part of the story. And so when you get into scenarios, if you are like looking for a role, you've got big gaps in your resume, talking about what you did during those times, not in a shameful way, but in a, here's how I developed, here's what I spent my time with, that will have value to the right people. If anybody is going to say, oh, you focus on too many different things, we don't think you can do anything, well, they're wrong, probably. And that's where we get into, kind of at the top of the talk of really understanding your value and being able to communicate what that like core piece is as you drive through it. So yeah, don't stop till you get enough. If you're the type of person who wants to jump around and do a bunch of things, do that. If you're the type of person who wants to focus on one thing forever, absolutely do that. But they will equal out. And don't worry if people say that you've jumped around too much, because they're wrong. And it's tech. Who doesn't? So then I'm gonna go ahead with my why and say, you have been fantastic. This has been fun. I don't know if I can see anybody. I kind of thought I would see a room full of faces, but I didn't. So I was just talking to myself, but that's still cool. But I assume somebody is seeing this. And I assume that they are fantastic. And I will Z you later, probably. And then I have one more joke, which is, and one more thing, which is, if everybody doesn't know, the ampersand was once the 27th letter of the alphabet, came after Z. It was pronounced and the name ampersand actually comes from school children singing their ABCs, and they would get to X, Y, Z, and they would say and per se and, which means and also and then per se and got mashed up together into ampersand. And so that's why it's called ampersand, and it's in the alphabet. And that's it. I have a thing for questions. I don't know if we're doing questions. I don't know if anybody's here, but like, I put a questions thing in there.
All right. Thank you, Andy, for the very informative presentation. Before we close out, we do have just a few questions for you. And the first is, do you have some more examples on how you implement some of these strategies that you shared?
Yeah, I think with some of the like earlier ones of really like understanding the value and getting like low level understanding of where you can like apply your learnings. Often when I'm talking through like actual like product stuff, where I'm explaining product pieces to either like stakeholders, external people that we're trying to kind of get on board, explaining the kind of like what and why and how something is working has a ton of value. So again, like kind of one of my examples being economic design that ran video games. If you play a game and you earn coins while you're playing it, the amount of coins you earn kind of like per hour is your currency drip. And then you need to figure out, well, what's that value to an end member? So if you were to say, hey, give me $1 for coins instead, trying to figure out, well, like how many hours of grinding the game to earn coins would you like to skip for just $1? And you set up that value prop. And then once you have that value prop, you can play with it. And so you could say, oh, well, if you spend, $1, you skip an hour, but if you spend $10, you skip 50 hours. And kind of like explain lower level concepts to be more understandable to people around you, and the people who don't necessarily follow exactly what you're talking about, when they understand where that value is, they can contribute better. And so it's a good way to kind of bring everybody along to the value that you have, and it sets you up as that kind of subject matter expert and that person who understands this more deeply than the regular people do, is basically what I'm getting at with that.
All right. Awesome. One more question. You spoke a lot about your experience and how your career began from a fairly young age. So do you have any advice for the product professionals out there that are just getting started in their careers?
Yeah. If you're referring to people who are also at a young age getting started in their careers, I think the big piece there is early on with what I was saying up at the top of like kind of like find the niche, find what really like matters to you. Most PMs, APMs have a base set of skills that is like generic enough that it's transferable. So there's nothing that's going to be particularly unique about the way that like you do stakeholder interviews or the way that you organize a project or the way that you do this. And so the subject matter becomes that much more important. So if you're somebody who's really passionate about health wearables, as an example, do that. Be passionate about that thing. Be into it. If you're really passionate about like banking software, get really knowledgeable on banking software and apply those learnings into what you're doing. And so one example that I'm going to give, which is a great way to really like cheat through some of the ways that you can manage ideas, is early on in my career, I worked at Electronic Arts, massive game studio. Because I was always like tracking other games, as I mentioned, to see like what was changing, I started writing up these reports on like breakdowns of specific features that had changed in these other games. And I would share those out. And it would just kind of be a like, hey, FYI, Farmville is doing this, Tetris Blitz is doing this now. Oh, look, both of these games are doing the same way to do leaderboards. Isn't that interesting? And I would share that out. And it started becoming a part of my role where every 2 weeks I would release kind of a new breakdown of a feature in another game. And being very young, what this did is it set me up as a go-to person for a breadth of knowledge for deep dives into specific things. So then I started getting requests from people to say, hey, could you look at this feature in this game and produce this competitive analysis? And because it was something I just liked doing, I liked breaking down these pieces, it became kind of a core part of my role. And the secret that I'll tell all of you is I owned the narrative of those. So the things that I liked about it, things I thought were valuable, were the things that were focused on. And so there was a very indirect way for me to have a lot of impact in what we were doing, because of course the way you break something down is the way that somebody is going to consume it. Reasonable people could look at the same thing, break it down slightly differently, but your voice and your kind of like unique value comes through with that. You can also learn how people like to consume that information. So if you're new in it, find a niche. It's unpaid labor kind of, but like start breaking down competitors on how they solve certain problems and share that with your direct people. It'll help to skip the part where, because you're new and young, people don't want your opinion of it because you don't have enough experience. Like your opinion is not really what they're looking for, but it gives you a more like authoritative view into what those things are. And you'll learn a ton by breaking stuff down.
All right, absolutely. And we have just one more kind of just for fun question to close out with, which is, what is one of your favorite products and why?
My favorite products. I'm gonna say it's the Amazon Echo, and it's a silly thing. It's a physical product. Like there's no real interface to it. But I think the reason is because it's kind of an empty box that you can get out of what you put into it. And so I love anything that can be many things for many people and really evolves kind of like the specific value that it gives based on like how much you want to engage in it. Anytime you have something that is just like, it is this thing and it's this thing alone, it does nothing else. That kills me. It's like people who use like Instagram to blog, I think is incredible, because it's like, that's not what it's for, but that's what you're going to use it for. And that's so much fun. You can really get that value. Or people, who use TikTok to share financial advice or to like break down, not just dance moves, but like the histories of things. It's a very fun way to like take that medium and evolve it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Andy, for your time and for bringing so much wisdom to us today. This video will be going live on our website, and we're also in the process of launching our YouTube channel. So we'll be going live on there as well this Friday. So keep an eye for that. And thank you for everybody who tuned in today, and we'll see you next time.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
I know.